Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook live stream on the events of what's happened today at in Gaza. Sorry, I'm trying to set this up. And also, when is decolonization quote unquote legitimate? Um, when is resistance okay? When is liberation acceptable? And this is a perspective from a Native Hawaiian myself under U.S. colonial occupation. So I thought I would just do a video about this since I've been thinking about it all morning because obviously it's been everywhere that there has been um, there has been an event. Let's put it that way. There's been an event in the area of what's called Israel, and also that you know there's been a lot of obviously there's really been a lot of discussion about it, and the discussion is whether or not what happened was justified. Is it good or bad? Is it should we support it? Should we not support it? Is the violence acceptable? Is it when is it acceptable? What make Who gets to gatekeep whether it's acceptable or not? Um, and that this is like a it's a this like this is something I've been watching for a long time, and it's obviously I should probably say so I don't get this video taken down that we don't condone or support war or violence anywhere on the earth because and not I'm not just saying that because that would be a TOS violation, but we don't want unnecessary suffering, oppression, violence, and wars to be happening anywhere, whether that's in that one a little bit north of that region in Ukraine, a war in the Taiwan Strait, any of the wars that the U.S. with its 800 military bases around the world is currently starting and continuing, and we don't want any of those to be happening, right? We also don't want colonization to be happening either, right? Historical and continued colonialism, which is violence itself. So we don't want genocide to be happening, which is violence, of varying kinds. So we don't want any of that to be happening. But the reality is that imperialist war, colonialist war, colonialism, settler colonialism, capitalism itself is really a massive systemic violence. We don't want any of that to be happening, but that is happening, and I think we have to like start with that reality. And there are some people who you can kind of see who is like, this is a picture, obviously, if you haven't seen it yet. This is a picture, a video of the this is a video of a bulldozer being taken over by one of the colonized peoples of in Palestine that is bulldozing over the apartheid fence. This is from this video here. Let's play this real fast. الله أكبر شرفوا يا جماعة الله يرحم الجدار. The text says, bulldozer operated by Gaza resistance tearing down an Israeli occupation fence erected on the border, literally breaking apart the Israeli created mass prison in the strip. And so this is that there's some people are, and I think they're correctly saying this image will be in history books. This image will be everywhere when the final annals, the memory of this, it goes down in the human civilizational record. This is going to be a very important event. It really is, because it is an apartheid wall. It's an apartheid wall. It is a settler colonial genocidal open air prison wall. And so what you can kind of tell who is on which side of the issue or not which side, but you can kind of tell where people's opinions and feelings about this fall, right? Whether they're like both sidesing, they're kind of or leaning on the side of the fascist apartheid state. Obviously I'm telling you where I'm leaning. Some of them are leaning on the side of um the settler colonial genocidal occupier. I that's what it is. I'm sorry, that's just what it is. Um and those people are tend to be people who are more comfortable further from the violence, benefit from the violence of settler colonialism and capitalism, right? The whiter you are, the more the wealthier you are, the more distant you are from, like, if you're in a upscale neighborhood in, an exurb in New York, or if you're in a I can look at the avatar, I can almost tell you a lot of the time what their take's gonna be. um you know White lady in Canada that like has a globe emoji and a plant, I know what your taste's gonna be. The further you are removed from, and the more that you materially, concretely benefit from the real ongoing mass violence, the more likely you are to either say, "Well, we just have to hope for peace, and we have to condemn all sides." Ilhan Omar obviously has sold out her own people. Um, and but anyways, it's I'm not saying that like it's like, I'm not saying that, again, like I said, we don't want any of this violence to happen, but settler colonialism and capitalism and the wealthier, more powerful systemic oppressor um uh always benefits by trying to use obscurantism just to try to make everything vague, both sidesing, right? There were fine people on both sides of the Charleston massacre of white supremacists, Trump supporters, right? And Heather and the leftists, Black Lives Matter supporters, who got run over by the car. There were fine people on both sides. It always benefits. Now in that case, right, it benefits, specifically Donald Trump, and specifically the tiki torch carrying Jews will not replace us marchers, right? But in general, like, this kind of making obscuring, distorting, distracting, calling for civility and peace always benefits those who are more empowered and of the oppressor class. And nobody is like, very not that many people on the earth are purely all oppressor class and only benefit, right? But some people are more than others. You know what I'm saying? Like I saw, if you are a multimillionaire white American cis straight man or woman, even more if you're a man, inside of California, you have a lot of layers of benefit from racism, colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, etc. And also you being in the imperial metropole inside the United States, where you lived, all that stuff matters. Non-disabled versus disabled, and so everybody has, but if you have more of that, then you're going to tend to want to obscure you both sides. There are fine people on both sides. There's a lot of unjust violence on both sides, and let's just kind of freeze the conflict. Let's just talk about it. Like, let's talk about it like rational adults. Let's call for X and Y. Let's write a letter to the senator. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't talk in dialogue, but if your situation is such that you are undergoing like real, immediate violence, like you are like, and what kind of violence? I mean, it does, how much of it, right? If your people, right, let's go into what is Gaza for real though, actually, okay, not like what some liberal German crypto racist liberal things, because I got into a thing and I put that person on blast on Mastodon today, who was telling indigenous people whose side they should stand on. I'll put him on, but I'll put him on blast later again. The Palestinians stood with us Hawaiians on Mauna Kea as we supported them in Gaza, and so I have this little thing. I have a lot to say about, because obviously as a Native Hawaiian, I have a different perspective than a lot of people. But let's get to what is Gaza. So Gaza, in response to Palestine's resistance to the genocidal settler colonialism, Israel has killed at least 161 Palestinians, 7 times more Palestinians murdered than the Israelis. Also, everyone who was struck were civilians. So this idea that they're terrorists because they're civilians hit number one. Many people that are being called civilians are active duty Israeli military personnel. So they're not civilians. Number two, half the population of Palestine is in poverty. 97% of their water is undrinkable. It's been that way for a long time. The statistics, it's over straight up genocide. It's not just like it's worse than Hawaii. It's not just cultural genocide, and then some other forms of violence, the police violence, mass incarceration, displacement of Native Hawaiians from our land. The poisoning of our water, bombing of our sacred sites, forced. It is forced displacement. In Palestine, it's worse. It's even more direct. Like, it is, the missiles strike the population like today, and they've done it historically constantly for the last decades. Palestine was, and it's important, the United States was directly involved in this. The United States, as a genocidal settler colonial capitalist empire, was directly involved in the creation of Israel, which is based upon the annihilation of the Palestinian people. This was Palestine initially, and you can see how from 1946 to 47, 67, 2012, and today, it's just about literally stealing houses, stealing schools, stealing territory. Like, you can watch videos today of Israelis just walking into Palestinian areas, literally like stealing their house, throwing people's things out, and then threatening violence. Like, it's like 1800s. It's 1800s European pilgrims showing up and just killing Native Americans and taking their land. It's just old school, completely mask off, completely brutal settler colonialism. It's like a place in the world. It's almost like going back in history and like watching that happen in real time. So, and it's all, you can look up the statistics. It is very clear that the Palestinians are massively, their poverty rate is like 50%. Like, everything is through the roof in terms of their life expectancies. Their children are dying at massive rates. They're literally being militarily stricken by missiles indiscriminately, hitting civilians all the time. Right? The water is poisoned. Israel limits the amount of calories that come into Gaza. Like, it's they ban chocolate, they ban chicken, eggs, they ban corn to stop Palestinians from growing food. It's literal like starvation, famine. This is like British, French strategies against Indians. India, and also in Native Americans. This is like what colonizers have done in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and in Hawaii to some extent. Although we have to be clear that this is like worse than what's happening in Hawaii. Hawaii's water is not 97% unpotable yet. The U.S. military dumped 10,000s of gallons of jet fuel in our water and has done that repeatedly, but at least 50% of Hawaii's water is reasonably potable. In Palestine, you can't drink the water. So, but this is the reality that is being obscured by liberal and conservatives, Westerners, Israelis, obviously, that work with the United States and the West, the capitalist colonial world. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The more privileged you are, the more you benefit from the United States, the more your social circles and that you are connected to that are more privileged in a variety of ways, the more likely you are to try to obscure these facts and try to make light of that and try to both sides this situation. The same way that when white supremacists beat up a black or brown person, there was a lot of, the people who are to say, oh well, black people also hurt white people. Anti-white racism is a big problem, right? These are the same kind of people that are going to be jumping to to try to say, well, the Palestinians also did horrible things to Israelis, and it's just all back and forth, and we don't know whose side to support. We just hope violence ends, and maybe people can just talk it through. We'll just talk it through, and or just some obscuring, useless nonsense that isn't related to what the oppressed people, the Palestinians, actually, the colonized people, actually think. Anyone who says they support indigenous people, by the way, right? Anyone who does a land acknowledgement and says that, this university that we are presenting at in Toronto is on, stolen land of the Native people. We are doing this conference on stolen, Stolo or Lakota land, these land acknowledgement things. And you talk about, if you're a professor and you teach decolonization and you're not standing on the side of actually colonized people, you are a hypocrite. Also, very should be very clear. Also, if you support Native Hawaiians, you don't support the Palestinians, you're also a hypocrite. Anybody who comes to Hawaii and is claiming to support Hawaiians, a liberal, conservative, whoever, making these videos, and you aren't standing on the side of the Palestinians, like, resolutely, as a historically, massively colonized, oppressed class, you are a hypocrite, you're a liar, or you're ignorant, and you should become educated on that. Anyway, but let's move on though. Okay, so that's what Palestine is. I had this other. I should probably share this to this one as well. I forgot to share it. And so yeah. Let's see. Sorry, this I have some things I put on my son and they're not on the other side. Yeah, so this is the person though. So when I said, actually Palestine is deeply colonized, and Israel is conducting, the existence of Israel and all of its attacks are violent terrorism against the oppressed, and the oppressed, as Fanon and Black and Brown and Global South revolutionary leaders will tell you that the colonized cannot do any violence that is not justified to undo the greatest violence that is colonization. And so when this is a German person, by the way, so when German and white people in general, privileged people, especially of their class, don't hear what they want to hear from native people like myself, from colonized people like myself, then they get mad and they say, I like your games, but you're human trash. So that's actually a part of that process, right? Which is that it's like, if you don't get on the side of the civility politics and both sidesing, and well, this conflict, there's a lot of people, Iraqis and, the Iraq and the other side, there's many, the United States did some bad things in Iraq, but also Iraqis did some bad things back to the United States. And so we don't know, we don't really know. And, we have to condemn the Iraqi fighters who fought back against the million murders of the U.S. drone strikes, F-16 bombings, Fallujah, running over their cities with tanks, shooting 16-year-olds, right, in the hospitals, right? We don't, the 16-year-old that the American killed might have done some bad things. So if you aren't both sidesing, if you aren't just condemning violence in general in Iraq and both sidesing it, then you're pro-terrorism and you're human trash. But that's the stance of people like this. And anytime you at me, I'm gonna fucking put you on blast. So you better watch what you say to me. So yeah, take that. Anybody, you can go after that guy for being a racist white German. So anyways, Palestinians stood with us in Mauna Kea as we stood in support of Gaza. I'll give me 1 sec. Looks like this thing is running out of. That's how you know people. This is how you know people also that didn't play Neofeud and didn't they don't have lower reading comprehension than they should. You know, they didn't play Neofeud close enough. They would have figured out what I was trying to say with that. I like your games, except all the parts where you talk about colonialism and racism and supporting the oppressed. I don't like any of that. All I got was cool future, fun trench coat, neat cyber arm prosthetic. That's all you got. If that's all you got from Silver Spoon Games, while simultaneously criticizing Neofeud for being too on the nose, I will have to make them more on the nose next time, because obviously, you have the density of a neutron star. So I suppose I will have to make it more clear what I was trying to say before that. Sorry, I'm excited. My laptop is having an issue. Give me 1 second here. I gotta restart this. I hope that the internet is on. Is it on? Is the internet still on? Okay, I think my laptop is just losing its connection. Okay. Anyways, so the Palestinians still with us Hawaiians on Mauna Kea. So back to what, how does this have to do with Hawaii? So the Palestinians did stand with us Hawaiians on Mauna Kea as we supported them in Gaza. We both suffered settler colonialism and genocide. We suffer, not suffer. We continue to suffer settler colonialism and genocide, pushed by the U.S. empire. Wait, why is YouTube down? Weird. I'm trying. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so let's look at this. So this was the a concrete support that we got from the people of Gaza, the Palestinians. Okay. During our struggle, Holly and myself, we were on that mountain, by the way, when the United States was mass arresting us, Native Hawaiians, and threatening us with military sound cannons, B-52 bombers, and the greatest mass mobilization. The U.S. military was threatening us on Mauna Kea, like the U.S. military, and Israel is just part of the U.S. military in many ways, has and continues to threaten and also massacre Palestinians. And so this is the Palestinians in their land, with we stand with Mauna Kea. These are actually the trees. You see these trees behind this person here, right? These were actually, I believe these are the trees that were planted by a group of Native Hawaiians who traveled from Molokai to Palestine and planted over 300 olive trees to help to feed Palestinians. Okay, you see how the food insecurity, almost all food in Hawaii is imported from outside so that the United States can continue to control and continue to further genocide and eliminate Native Hawaiians, like the Maui fires, right, which were produced by U.S. colonial capitalists, caused climate change, mass, Maui fires, the replacement with non-native grasses. I have a whole thread about that, right? The Maui fires were non-native grasses based upon the U.S. colonial occupation, right? Monocropping sugar with Hawaiian and Filipino slaves, right? Under colonization, like Palestine, and then the native grasses that were super flammable, along with the U.S. backed corporations preventing water from getting to Lahaina, so there was no water in the fire hydrants. That's why hundreds of Hawaiians died, thousands more were displaced, and the United States is giving that land. So like like when Oprah, Maui, and other mega colonizers are buying up and gobbling up all of our land, right? In Lahaina right now, the United States is supporting billionaires and millionaires, West Maui, just giant corporations to steal up all of that Hawaiian land. This is not. It's worse in Palestine. So I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that what's happening in Hawaii is equivalent. It's far worse in Palestine, but it is similar in that it is a displacement of the indigenous native people, Native Hawaiians like myself, from this land, right? Weaponizing food so that we can't support ourselves. Weaponizing water. The water is poison in Palestine. Like, just all the water is unusable in Palestine because of what the U.S.-backed Israel is doing, right? So the same weapons that they use in Palestine, but to a greater extent, are also used against Native Hawaiians, right? And so when we went to Palestine to plant food trees, also this is a very important thing that we're trying to do here, right? Like sorry, I keep dovetailing out of this, but I keep on thinking of all these connections. Aina Momona, which you should be following, because I told you that's the place that you can actually find legitimate ways to support us Native Hawaiians against colonial capitalist occupation, and to support the survivors of the Maui fires, right? And you see here, right? So replanting food, undesertifying, right? Stopping the desecration of the land. It's not just desecration of the land. It's also intentional wastelandification so that the land doesn't produce food, right? Drying out the land. And so wildfires and very little food comes out of that land. This is part of our displacement. It's also part of eradicating our Native Hawaiian lifeways, where we lived in aloha and in pono, in justice and with respect with the nature, right, and with people, where we had for over 1,000 years land that fed and cared for over 1 million people in Hawaii. And the United States is not just about, we would like some hotels. It is about we would like some hotels and military bases, but it's also about making sure that Hawaiians can't care for themselves, don't have sovereignty, don't have independence, don't have food security, right? So a major thing that we're doing is trying to restore the ability to sustain ourselves on the land. It's the same thing that Vietnam, places like Cuba, Vietnam, anywhere that is resisting colonialism and the capitalism that comes with that, right, have had to figure out, right? So it's more than just Hawaiians want to plant kalo, coconut, and our historical food plants and medicinal plants because that's our culture. It is our culture, but it's also about decolonization, building actual independence, and resisting settler colonialism. So similarly, right? So when we went to Palestine to help them to build, to plant olive trees, because olive trees provide a lot of calories per tree, right? Olives are very high in fat, and they have a large dense calorie density per acre, right? And they grow well in the region that they're in. Okay, and so that's why we went there to support them. And this is a thing, this is very much often missed by people who have more privilege in the world because of their confluence of location, identity, family history, etc., and how much they benefit. Like I said earlier, they think that we just planting because planting gets us back in touch with nature. Obviously it's good to know your mother, that is nature, but it's also important for you to be independent. You cannot be reliant on outside entities, right? Especially oppressor colonial entities like the United States and Hawaii, like Israel and Palestine. You can't be reliant on outside entities for the food that sustains it and maintains your existence, or they will control you forever. That's how they control Native Americans inside the United States, or Native people, Turtle Islanders. That's how First Nations of Canada are controlled, right? Which is full of boil water advisories, food deserts everywhere, right? And so if you rely on them to keep you alive, then they can hold. That's a leash that's a chain they wrap around your neck. That's a cage that you can put you in, right? And so that's why we have to build our own food insecurity, and then you want to eventually develop beyond that, not food insecurity, medicinal security, economic security, right? Independence. Economic independence is very important after the food independence. Communications, I mean, it kind of spirals out from there. But as long as you are kept under wraps, this is why the U.S. bombed the Black Wall Street, or they bombed Tulsa. Whenever an oppressed people is accumulating some kind of sovereignty, food. This is why they murdered Fred Hampton. That's why they shot Malcolm X. The United States did. As an internal colonization of the black people inside the United States, because when the Black Panthers were destroyed and murdered by the United States, because not because they were ultra violent or terroristic, but because they were building food security with their lunch program, and beyond that, they were trying to build an independent mutual aid based, and also, of course, anti-racist, anti-capitalist, anti-military industrial complex organizations, right? And so that food security that they were building had to be crushed in the same way that the Israelis have to crush and disallow any import of corn. Any kind of food tree is banned from being imported into Palestine. They allow chicken eggs so that they can't raise chickens, right? It's literally about trying to starve Palestinians to death. They limit the caloric intake, and they've even done calculations, right? This is why the United States loves Israel, because the United States is the colonial, superpower genocide colonial champion, and then they test out new weapons of oppression in Israel. Like, oh, how many calories can you starve people out so that they die at a rate that doesn't immediately look like a famine to like international human rights investigators, but they're still dropping the population, right? And so that's what they do there. And so food security is why that's so important for people to maintain. Anyway, and so that's why we were there. Let me finish this. So we remember the history in Hawaii of colonialism and the people of Molokai support Palestine. They planted over 300 olive trees in Palestine this last year. Now the Native Hawaiians are protecting their sacred mountain from construction. We remember the history in Hawaii of colonialism and the usurpation of indigenous land that continues today. Palestinian farmers share this experience with the Kia'i, or protectors. Native Hawaiians have a state constitutional right to ascend Mauna Kea mountain for subsistence, culture, and religious purposes. They're gathering to protect the significant cultural and religious site from the construction of a 30-meter telescope. This was what was happening. We're still in the process of stopping that construction, by the way. There are already 21 telescopes, 13 observatories on the mountain. A history of state land mismanagement and broken promises since the state leased the mountain in 1968. Enough, say the protectors. So indigenous self-determination in the face of colonialist control is what we were about, and there's also environmental concerns. This was from a few years ago. But my point is that the oppressed peoples of the world, Native Hawaiians, Palestinians, obviously African, Asian, and many indigenous peoples all over Central South America, as well as their countries as a whole. We are more connected with each other globally than I think most people understand, and have been for a long time, like much longer than the average colonizer realizes. Or somebody who happens to live with a amount of privilege that the part of white privilege is the privilege to be ignorant. It's the privilege to be violent and ignorant of the violence that you've done, has happened, and is historically happening. And so, but the reality is that we know about what has happened to us. The Palestinians know what has happened to Hawaiians, and we know what's happened to them. What happens and continues to happen to this day. Indigenous people of Turtle Island know what happens to us, and most of them know what happens to the rest of the people in Africa. The people in Vietnam and the people in Cuba are constantly in collaboration to this day. Castro also said that China was the greatest hope for the global fight against colonialism before he passed away, as another placed under $135 billion worth of embargoes. And it's only the people of some confluence of privilege, right, that live in this delusional, simplified, completely lie-filled and half-truth-filled world of the Western consciousness. I call it the Western unconsciousness, really, but for everyone else, and it's filled with a lot of fantasy, science fiction that is disconnected from reality, when you have a concrete survival need, right, to get, when you are starving, right, the luxury of being ignorant, the luxury of spreading ignorance, the luxury of the intellectual laziness of the Westerner, who picks and chooses from a liberal or a conservative lie-filled narrative passed down to them by the Imperial State Department, or by your intelligentsia, your war propagandists in the New York Times, right, or your left, right, or center news. That is a privilege that you have because you are not worried about surviving. because you are a upper middle class in a G7 country, because you aren't black or brown or indigenous or Palestinian, etc. Right? You have the luxury to be ignorant because your ignorance does not mean you and your children suffer and die. I mean, yet. Right? And so, you can be ignorant of history. You have the white privilege is the privilege to be ignorant of history. It's the privilege to be ignorant of actually how economics functions. It's the privilege to be ignorant of how everything functions, from pandemics to AI to struggles over food, to what the reality is of the environment, who is actually contributing to the destruction of the environment, of the animals and plants, and climate change, etc. And I think that people need to really try to stop that, because, and this is the dilemma that oppressed peoples are always in, because the oppressors, right, like this video is showing, the oppressors are not going to willingly, by talking about it, take that wall down, right? The goal of Israel as a genocidal settler colonial state set up by the United States is to obscure and make everyone in the Western first world that are of the oppressor class, if they're conservative, then or just straight fascist, then that part of the first world, the American Republicans, and the like very deeply pro NATO people in Europe, they don't need a justification. They're just like, well, just commit genocide and just wipe them out because they don't deserve to live, and that's more land and money for us. For the liberals and the what's sometimes called the left, but it's kind of like liberals in left clothing, really. Then you have the both sides. Let's be civil. The civility, a conversation, and some kind of token human rights, advocacy, but not anything concrete, right? And so, but for the actual Palestinians, they don't have time to be wondering for the next. The liberal will live and die, right? Posting hashtag Palestine, but stop violence on both sides, and they can eat, drink Starbucks, right? The even the white Jew in Europe and the United States can fly in and out of Israel. The Palestinian cannot leave Palestine. They have to. There's many people that can't go back in. They're trapped inside of that place. They don't have somewhere else to go if they somehow get out. The people who have the luxury, they have the out. That's why people are pointing out that many of the there is that video of the Israelis running, right? See if I can get it. Israelis running from the Palestinians. Dun, 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 dun. Maybe it's Twitter might maybe not function now. Okay, let's try. I want the video though. Where's the video? Everybody running at the airport. There's a video of they're like trying to get on planes. Okay, I don't know but the people that are fleeing, trying to get Israel starts running. No, that's not the one I want. Anyway, I can't find it, but there's a video of all these Israelis like basically running away from the area. But the thing is, the Israelis have a place they have places to go. Those people have a place to retreat from, to retreat to. The Palestinians, that's all they have, and they're being systematically annihilated, right? Like I showed earlier, right? Their home is dwindling, and they're trapped in there like a cage. They're like the Palestinians are like there are like they're like rabbits or hamsters or like animals inside a cage. They're not animals, right? Obviously they're humans, but I'm just trying to think of a good metaphor that doesn't paint them in a bad light. there are like human resistance people, indigenous people trapped in a cage that is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, that is running out of water, running out of food, right? Israel is not giving them any option except to try to fight back in whatever way that they can, right? It's like being inside of a prison, and the amount of water is dropping. Like there's one pipe where water comes in and the water is coming out black, right? There was food is popped in through like a hole in the wall, and every day it's less and less and less, right? It's only a matter of time until people say, we have to do. We can't just sit here and wait to die, We can't sit here and wait to watch our children die, right? From malnourishment, from from malnourishment, from the poisoned water. We can't just wait to see if the West, if the U.S. and the Europeans can pressure Israel into, they're even the U.S. and Israel that work together declared boycott, divest, sanction as a terrorist activity, right? So even the attempt by Western, more privileged people, and even like Jews who feel terrible about what's happening in the U.S. and in Canada and other Western countries, who feel bad about it, trying to push the U.S. and their countries to stop giving aid to Israel to empower this genocide, but even that is deemed as terroristic activity, right? And then attacked, and you all kind of horrible things can happen to you if you join up in those movements. So so if you are a Palestinian, like one of these people, waiting to see if the West will be able to, if the oppressor will somehow, right, be able to stop you and your children from dying, right? You don't have the time to sit around and wait for that. Your children are dying in real time. Your buildings are being blown up in real time. Everyone's starving and running out of water in real time, right? That violence is happening every day, right? And so the people who are talking, it's really like nobody should be listened to about the Palestinian conflict, really, ultimately, except the Palestinians. But we can't hear them because the West and the U.S. Do their best to cover that voice, right? And every person who is sitting from the comfort, especially the people from Germany, Sweden, Canada, the U.S., sitting from their comfort of their upper middle class house, right? Poo-pooing and saying you can't resist that way, person in a prison that we have collectively put you in and are slaughtering you, right? That's like chopping somebody's leg off and telling them you have to politely ask me to stop chopping your leg off. You can't physically grab my hand, because when you grab my hand chopping your leg off, that hurt my wrist. I feel like you might have sprained my wrist when I was chopping your leg off with the butcher cleaver. So you got to stop that, because that's violence. When you stop me killing you, that's violence. That's the Westerner, that's the Israeli, that's the privileged, wealthy, usually white person outside Palestine talking about how they should or should not resist. And it's clear. Like it's very clear, and it benefits those people, right? When you support Israel, the chances of you getting a job, which is the U.S. imperial project, then you have better chances of getting a job, making money in the colonial, capitalist, genocidal Western world. You get a good job in D.C., Wall Street, somewhere. If you support it in the UK, you get a good job there, right? They'll pay you money, right? You won't lose face, right? Now, but if you try to stop the children from being slaughtered, right? Then they say, why are you being violent? Stopping me from slaughtering Palestinians is like it's terrorism, right? That's basically what it is, And so, but, and this is where like the lines are unfortunately being very clearly drawn, right, in the world, where you have people in Africa. What's happening in what's happening in Niger, where Niger is liberating itself. France is pulling troops out. Why is France pulling troops out of Niger? Did the people of Niger, right? Did the people of Niger plead to the Americans and the white Europeans and the ADL and the Canadian privileged people and the French people and the French government. Please, French people, lobby your government to stop the suffering and the 70% poverty rate and no electricity and starvation of our Nigerian people. Did it work? Is that how decolonization happened? I mean, if there was a pathway that Niger could like ask the French to push their government to stop this, like, boycott, divest, and sanction from Nigerian genocide and Nigerian colonization by France, then I'm sure the Nigerian people would be like, we'd rather not have to take up arms and like have to, take up more drastic measures, right? But that's not the case, unfortunately. I mean, I'm not saying that's never the case, but just as another example, in Bolivia, they had great success, right? Evo Morales is going to be running for the next president, who is the head of the Socialist Party. And he was overthrown by the United States for Elon. We will coup whoever we want, Musk, to get the lithium at cheap prices by the colonial capitalist United States. And so Elon Musk, basically pushed that coup, caused a slaughter of dozens and dozens of the indigenous socialist Bolivians, right? But Bolivia did manage to resist that coup with a general strike, with the organized, many of these things depend on economics, material conditions, geopolitical, geostrategic, many factors impact this. Now, the Bolivians also had 60% of the Bolivian military, including the Air Force, sides with the indigenous socialist Bolivians, right? And the United States did slaughter with literal goose-stepping Nazis, including the Áñez administration supported by the far-right, ultra-right Camacho elements of Bolivia that literally gunned down Bolivians in the street, right? But there was a military threat in Bolivia to reinstate their path towards liberation, socialism. Millions of people were being educated, coming out of poverty. They were developing their country, feeding themselves, kicking out Canadian, paramilitary-backed agricultural corporations, kicking out U.S. colonialism, kicked out Janine Áñez, right? The fascists backed by the United States, the CIA, the AOS, etc., and Elon Musk to get the lithium for cheap. And now they're using their resources to empower their people with sovereignty and self-determination, with a combination of mass organization, class and anti-colonial, anti-imperialist consciousness, and also they do have military. They have a military power. The indigenous socialists of Bolivia. It was not exercised to any. There wasn't a war in Bolivia, but it did involve a military threat. There was a specific call from a MAS affiliated Air Force general who called the city after Evo Morales was. They were trying to put the fascist U.S. backed, IMF neoliberal banker advised regime was trying to get Evo Morales on a plane to Mexico. They're trying to stop him from getting on a plane to Mexico so they could capture him as like a bargaining chip, basically, and do whatever they wanted to him. But the general of the Air Force of Bolivia called up the U.S.-backed fascists and said, if you don't let Evo get off of that tarmac and take off in that plane, your cities will burn. So there was a military threat behind their liberation. That's what I'm trying to say. But they didn't use it. Were they justified in that? Was the U.S. justified in the mass slaughter of indigenous Bolivian people, the overthrowing of the democracy, and the greater long-term Euro-colonial subjugation of the indigenous people of Bolivia for centuries? Were they justified in that violence? Do you as an oppressor class, American, Canadian, European, etc., get to decide whether they were justified? in their liberation to use the Bolivian military against the fascist US-backed Nazis? Or are you pro-Nazi? um, um, Ultimately, the Bolivians used a the Bolivians used a general strike in Bolivia with 85% of the entire country, um, 85% of the entire country went on strike, and the entire country was shut down. Um, the construction workers, doctors, nurses, everybody. The United States should think about doing that. By the way, you know, if instead of Bernie, if any instead of wasting too much time on electoral, liberal, you know, Western unconsciousness, thinking that, you know, voting Bernie Sanders in would make any difference without mass collective organized actual people power, economic, food, and etc. All power. If people actually did what Bolivia did in the 20 teens, maybe the U.S. would have a democracy and socialism by now. But the Bolivians did, the U.S. didn't. That was my comparison for the Bernie election. It was that the U.S. did not have the masses organized. Camacho was a right-wing populist and committed to base in Santa Cruz. Bolivia's economic powerhouse and a bastion of opposition to MAS was the president of the city civic committee. His arrest provoked a furious reaction from the supporters in the city, who torched several buildings, including the prosecutor's office and a fleet of cars outside it. Anyway, Camacho was the U.S.-backed fascist that massacred indigenous people with just like opening gunfire, like assault rifles shooting indigenous people in the street to make them go home. Anyway, and so, but what they did was they had there was a general strike. The Áñez administration was overthrown. The U.S.-backed fascists were overthrown. And Gina Áñez she wasn't killed, by the way. She was overthrown, and then she went to rehabilitation to learn how to get a real job. She went to a training program to learn how to work in textiles rather than being paid by Elon Musk to colonize entire countries with the backing of Nazis. So that's a pretty good job upgrade. Now you get to actually produce something for the world, right? So Janine Áñez makes, you know, wiggle dresses for and slacks and sweaters instead of getting paid by the United States to overthrow sovereign countries and socialism for the continued destruction of the earth for her own benefit. And so that's also what Israel is, right? It's Netanyahu and a band of horrible, self-interested ghouls. It's also what Ukraine is. It's Zelensky, a multimillionaire with a retirement home. He's a comedian backed by a billionaire, also U.S. collaborator, backing Nazis in their own country for the interests of the empire, the United States and NATO. And so, anyways, but evil the Bolivians did not choose to use, finally, to throw out the fascists. They used a general strike, mass withholding of labor, what Hawaiians used historically, as I like to talk about, which is the Ahupua'a mass exodus, which actually is, again, this is a multi-thousand-year Hawaiian strategy to bring corrupt regimes, to bring unjust leaders and unjustness into rightness, or pono. It was a mass exodus of the workers from a subdivision of the Hawaiian land. So it's actually a very old indigenous tactic. And so, but that sometimes you need more than that. But that was enough. With the general strike that shut the entire Bolivian economy down was enough to oust Áñez and the U.S.-backed regime, and then the MAS Indigenous Socialist Party was reinstalled. Anyway, so my point there is that my point with that is that, bringing it back to Gaza, is that the method of resistance of the oppressed people is a thing that they need to choose for themselves, right? So the just as another example, right? So let me finish that. So the Palestinians, right, have elected to conduct a military operation, right? The Palestinians have chosen to conduct a military operation to push back and open up the settler colonial prison, right? To open up that apartheid wall. Like where's that wall? I want a picture of that wall. Or is it? Yeah. So they've elected to, run a military operation to start to break up, open the Israeli mass prison in the Strip, right? And so, but that military operation that they chose to do, that is their prerogative because they are the oppressed class, right? And like, while we don't want any violence to occur, the greatest mass violence is the violence of the Israeli oppressor upon them, right? If the Palestinians had chosen to say, hey, what we need right now is we need everyone in the U.S. and Europe to keep pressuring their elected politicians in the free Western democratic world to try to see if you can pressure, to see if the U.S. and, van der Leyen and, Rishi Sunak or whatever clown is in the UK and Canada, see if you guys can pressure NATO and the U.S. to get Israel to see the error of its ways and pull back. See if you can get Netanyahu and his apartheid regime to stop apartheid. If the Palestinians asked you to do that, then, well, that's their prerogative to decide that. If the Palestinians said, well, let's have a general strike, you see how that wouldn't really work out because of the economic and the material situation for the Palestinians, right? So the Bolivian choice, right? Right? They did not use their military. They did not use the military in that moment. They had military power, but they didn't use the military. They used a general strike to liberate their country, right? But that was the prerogative of the indigenous, socialist, oppressed peoples of Bolivia, not your decision to make, right? Just one more example. Also a quick history lesson, and also a video game shout out. Decolonization is a game I specifically made that is about the U.S. I'm just gonna play a little bit of this. Just the first part.
AD 1965. The U.S. invades Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism. The Americans bombed them into the Stone Age. Hundreds of thousands die. But the Vietnamese fight back with all their might.
Time to kick some capitalist colonizer butts. I'll be back with my tank.
Anyways, and so Decolonators, obviously Decolonators is a tongue-in-cheek comedic video game, but the history in the very beginning and the ultimate point of it is along the same lines, right? Like I said, the point of today's video, right, which is that when is decolonization legitimate? When is it acceptable? When is it right? When is it justified? Right? What kind of decolonization is justified? When you're trying to stop your own oppression by the systemic oppressor, okay? And so Decolonization is a game that it points out the ultimate systemic oppressor in this case is the United States that has bombed the native indigenous Vietnamese people into the Stone Age, right? In an attempt to spread communism, which is the side of liberation and is on the side of making sure that all people have actual equality, actual human rights, which is the right to food, housing, clothing, and to exist in their gender, in their ethnic background, et cetera, which is why the fascists have always been anti-communist, and anti-communism and fascism, two sides of the same coin. That's why Chrystia Freeland is being celebrated in the imperialist liberal circles, despite being a Nazi and in the deputy prime minister of Canada. And so the Vietnamese elected, right? The Vietnamese elected to resist their colonization, right? The Vietnamese elected to resist their colonization, right, by direct military fight, direct military violence. Now, and there are many people who say, well, the Vietnamese were so horrible. the same kind of people who will say that the Palestinians should just
Right.
try to talk it out, and
Anyway,
let's start a
you
peace
guys probably
process.
remember that British woman that
let's open up some
hinting
discussion
at.
with.
Here's
with
Netanyahu,
with
who
the
crawled out of his
people,
hole.
with the
Okay,
Israelis.
so
the
I told you they
Palestinians
started at the
are committing
crack
such
of dawn.
horrid violence. We have to
Netanyahu
end the Palestinian
didn't
violence.
say.
I'm sorry. This video's playing. Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally played that. I was playing the audio from Richard Medhurst. Oops. So, anyways, okay. So, in case you missed what I said, so the people who will call for the violence, right? The Palestinians have to stop attacking Israelis. Stop attacking. Is the same kind of people who would say the Vietnamese have to stop shooting at Americans, right? Stop shooting at Americans, right? But you see, I hope it's more obvious how ludicrous that is, right? The United States invaded Vietnam. The Vietnamese didn't invade California. The United States went to Vietnam, bombed like that country into the Stone Age. Hundreds of thousands of people were massacred. The United States, right? The United States were shooting children, women in the rice paddies from helicopters. They just came in. They napalmed the entire jungles. They burned villages, burned rice farms to ash. They used chemical weapons. They used Agent Orange. Massive millions of birth defects. They caused, after the war, there was famine and destruction for years and years and years and decades later. People were impoverished, right? And the United States citizens, right? While many of them did not support the war, if the Vietnamese did not violently, when some people will say, well, you should have just let the Americans, right? Let the oppressors, the American people, push their government to stop the war, and the Vietnamese should have just stood there and got shot, right? If the Vietnamese had not fought back, right? Let me turn off this stage. If the Vietnamese had not fought back with military violent means, the United States would have not ever stopped the attack on Vietnam. They would have wiped that entire country off of the map. They've done this to other countries. They bombed Korea so much there was nothing left to bomb. They turned Cambodia into just a giant field of craters. The United States has no morality, as I believe it was Kwame Ture who said that, who also visited Vietnam. Okay, so the Vietnamese directly militarily resisting with guerrilla warfare, with incredibly ingenious tactics, very similar to the Palestinians, resisting a more technologically and economically empowered oppressor with ingenious techniques, right? Did you see the Palestinian bomb? The Palestinian I have a link to it. The Palestinian that dropped that shell from a drone onto a tank. They were using parasails. They were using like hang gliding into. Palestinians are hang gliding like from some kind of a mini car, like an ATV, into a hang glider, and they glided over the wall. They dropped a munition from a drone onto the tank. They actually have video of that. Let me see if I can play that real fast. Yeah, so they look at that. Right onto the tank. They blew the tank up. And I mean, it's like the Palestinians, they don't have, I don't know what the exact numbers, but it's like they don't have anywhere near their assets that Israel has. They don't have the backing of the US empire, right? But they still managed to do a lot. Anyway, long story short, my point is that, like, if the Vietnamese had not resisted the United States invasion, right? So you get that one, yeah, like the My Lai massacre. There's all kind of horrific stuff the United States did in Vietnam. The United States would not have stopped at anything. The United States would not be happy until all the evil communism was purged until the Vietnamese were resubjugated. The Vietnamese working in rice paddies, slaving away in rubber factories. If the U.S. would turn Vietnam back into a slave colony like the French had before that, like the Japanese that tried to oppress, but the Vietnamese kicked the French and the Japanese asses out, right? And so, try to get that video of the woman, the U.S. soldier, Vietnamese woman soldier. There's that famous video of the Vietnamese woman soldier. Also important to remember, there's there are Vietnamese women soldiers also. You can watch our friend Luna Oi's channel to learn more about this. Also fought against the U.S. military, so it was where the U.S. military only had men on the other side. But and so if the Vietnamese hadn't chosen to fight back, the oppressor, the United States and the U.S. free country citizens in the so-called liberal democracy of the Western U.S. country, if the Vietnamese had just pleaded and begged the Americans to write letters to their senators and representatives, right, to protest against the war, which many people did, but if the Vietnamese had only relied upon the Americans to plead to beg their government to pull the U.S. military out of Vietnam, the U.S. military would never have pulled out of Vietnam because there's a capitalist imperialist plutocracy that's always run the United States, and they don't care about peace. The United States has been at war basically for almost every single year of its existence, right? After World War II, the United States has started countless wars of aggression, genocidal, imperialist wars across the planet for the profit of its military-industrial complex and its arms dealers, and to maintain global capitalism and accelerate the richest people's fortunes on Earth even further than they need to be, right? So the United States would never have stopped. After Vietnam, the U.S. would have tried to move into China. It would have tried to move into whatever part of Asia it could take back, right? The way the United States government talked about all of that area in the communist rise after World War in the mid 20th century was, who lost China? We have to stop the spread of this communism into Korea, into Vietnam, and so we have to, by extension, who decolonized China? Who liberated China, right? Who allowed China to be liberated? Who allowed Vietnam to be liberated? Who allowed decolonization of who allowed this Korea to have people working for their own betterment, not for the benefit of external forces, right? And colonial capitalists outside their country. So again, so if the Vietnamese had waited for that, then nothing would happen. So the important thing is that the choice of liberation, the choice of the method of liberation was selected by the Vietnamese to fight back, right? And the way that they saw that was the thing that they, not every single person agreed, but that's what the decision that they came to as the oppressed, colonized people. And the duty of the oppressed members of the oppressor country that want to be on the right side of history, that want to be on the doing the right thing and the ethical and the moral thing, in the so-called free world, is to support what those oppressed people decide, right? Not whatever you think they should be doing, because number one, you probably don't know anything about almost anything, because you live in a disinformation system called capitalism and colonialism, because your confluence of privileges, economic, social, your location, etc., massively disincentivize you from learning about the truth about history, economics, and politics, and also you have clear conflicts of interest that you don't even always recognize are impacting your thinking, right? Giving the United States, giving NATO, giving colonizer countries, giving Israel the benefit of the doubt when you should be more critical. And so for that reason is why you have to listen. Number one, you have to listen to the oppressed. And I say that as a Native Hawaiian, right? Again, coming back to the present. As a Native Hawaiian, right, who is not as badly oppressed as the people in Gaza, in Palestine, it is our duty also to listen to them, because they are further, their situation is concretely worse, and also to, to recognize that and not just go, well, I understand what it's like to be a Palestinian, because in Hawaii, the U.S. banned our language and culture, and they overthrew our country, they imprisoned our leaders, forcibly made us a colony, they're starving us out, and we have horrible health and poverty and mass incarceration statistics, and the worst in the United States. Still, that's the worst inside of the U.S. and its colonies, or its U.S. and its not completely war zone colonies. It's worse in other parts of the world. In Iraq, it's worse. In a lot of Africa, it's worse. And in Palestine, it's worse. So we have to also listen to those people and support what the people of Gaza want, the way that the people of Palestine want to work to liberate themselves. Not, however, we feel like is the smartest, best way, because we went to what? We sat in, we listened to a BDS panel, because what? We read some books that we didn't understand because we live in the Western world full of disinformation, going to seminars after reading those books filled with reactionary, disinformed people with PhDs from Harvard and Princeton and Yale. Getting a degree, I don't want to go in and insulting the entire Western so-called education system, but I will. But I should stop before I do that, because that's not what this stream is about. My point is that it's again, it's finally to circle. What I was trying to circle back to is the legitimacy is not decided by the colonizer. The violence, coming back to the thread that I was working on, and I think I was going into the Mastodon because I forgot to post this a little bit. This one, yeah. Anyone who this is a bunch of shares from this is the Black Agenda Report, Jamu Baraka, two good sources that definitely have been in this struggle longer than many people, including myself. Black Alliance for Peace. Jamu Baraka is a very, very, very high on the list of enemies of the so-called United States. Anyone who mischaracterizes legitimate Palestinian resistance against colonial occupation as aggression or any other liberal-inspired adjectives is not a friend of the Palestinians, but a collaborator with liberal obscurantism and mass confusion that only benefits the colonialists. We stand with the People's Forum says we stand, but the People's Forum was recently branded as a Chinese Communist Party paid for anti-American operation, and so that's how you're probably doing something right, is when the United States starts calling you a Chinese agent or something. People's Forum says we stand with the Palestinian people. The New York Times said that, and so did the Washington Post and the BBC. We stand with the Palestinian people and defend their right to resist apartheid and oppression. Cut all U.S. aid to Zionist occupation, and so that's another reason, right? That you will be called a. Again, if you call for ending aid to the Zionists, that has been labeled as terrorism, right? It's like the level of intellectual acrobatics and intellectual, it's almost like a MC Escher painting inside the mind of a liberal man. It's like that. It is a funhouse mirror, twisted, warped, incoherent maze in their head. I don't know how that works. How is calling for the end of the aid to a literal mass child killing state terrorism? I don't know, but that's where you live. The International Magazine Palestine, international, also our friend Luna Oi, our Vietnamese comrade who helped me work on Decolonators as the Vietnamese indigenous communist Vietnamese researcher. Luna works with International Magazine. This was a school, and this is the reality that they've been living in for decades. And okay, let's move on. To see Palestinians in Gaza bulldoze down Israeli smart tech barriers that have kept them imprisoned and besieged in an open-air prison that's been bombed mercilessly and flattened over and over again for the past 15 years. Goosebumps. That's why this image is going to be so important. Like, this is the first time that the Palestinians have like been able to organize enough people, economic and military power to break open the wall themselves. It's actually so important. I think actually this image is so important because it is not, it's not the Democrats, it's not liberals, right? It's not Ilhan Omar, right? It's not Joseph Biden, right? It's not any Western, any nonprofit NGO. It's not Human Rights Watch. It's not Amnesty International. It's not the UN. It's not any of these organizations outside of Palestine that has torn down an apartheid wall, right? None of them have done. If the West was going to stop this, they would have stopped this a long time ago. The reality is the US, European countries, all the US allies, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, all the usual suspects, right? All of them don't care about human rights, don't care about justice, equality, freedom, any of that crap. They don't care about decolonization, whatever their universities tell their students. As a whole, they finally do not, and their governments and their power structures do not. If their people could take back power, then they would be outside the United States orbit, wouldn't they? And they should try to do that. But the West does not stand for any of that. Because if they've had decades upon decades upon decades since the end of World War II, since the genocide of the Palestinian peoples began, they have had the opportunity to do that. But they've proven that they can't. And so the Palestinians have elected to use a variety of tactics, and including military attacks, which are justified because the colonized, there's no violence the colonized can do against the colonizer that isn't justified. And it is them that have liberated themselves. Not any of your organizations, none of your anti-war organizations. Not that you shouldn't be anti-war, and that doesn't help, right? Not that the anti-war protesters in Vietnam didn't help, but it wasn't the anti-war protesters in the United States that liberated Vietnam. It was the Vietnamese people. And it's not the anti-Gaza protesters. It's not the anti-Israel protesters in the U.S. and in the West that are liberating. It is the Palestinians themselves that have done it, and it's really proving the point. It's really proving that point, right? They're AOC and the Democrats or the so-called anti-war conservatives, they're not parachuting into Gaza, ripping that wall open with Captain America. The U.S. military isn't busting that wall open, right? Anarchists, Marxists, socialists in the U.S., white leftists in Europe, they're not coming in with the People's Liberation, the European socialists or communists or Marxists or anti-war army and opening that fence up, right? We don't see Vosh. We don't see. I don't know if people know that. Nobody knows who that clown is outside of small circles of we don't see the intelligence. We don't see these so-called humanitarian orgs. We don't see the people with the rose emoji, the globe emoji. We don't see people with the peace emoji from the West, from the white world, coming on down there, opening that fence up. It's the Palestinian people, through multiple means, including military, and including commandeering tractors, busting that wall open and liberating themselves. And it's important for people to remember, right? So that's really what I want to say is that and so what does that have to do finally, coming back to Native Hawaiians, because I'm a Native Hawaiian, right? So what am I saying that Native Hawaiians should militarily directly attack Pearl Harbor or something? No, that's not what I'm saying. Right? What I'm saying is that let's bring it to Mauna Kea, right? Well, let's talk for a little bit about what's happening in Hawaii. Since the U.S. invaded our sovereign country of Hawaii, Hawaii tops the U.S. in police killings, disproportionately Pacific Islander. Hawaii is by far number one most economically unequal in the U.S., worse than L.A., New York, and D.C. by magnitudes. Hawaii leads the U.S. in a school-to-prison pipeline. More children are rounded up in schools of Native Hawaiian descent and ripped from families than in any other place in the United States, and then put in prison. The U.S. banned our language and culture and nearly extinguished it. Less than 100 kids spoke the language in the 1980s. The Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have the highest rate of incarceration, 4 times that of white people, even higher than the average, even higher rate of incarceration than even black people in the United States. And we also have the lowest healthy life expectancy. Native Hawaiian children are also targeted by the U.S. for child removal to prevent parents from passing Hawaiian language, history, and lifeways to the next generation. So all of these things are just a small list of the things that have been happening to us in Hawaii. I have a longer list, and I have threads within threads within threads within threads within threads, if you want a longer list of them. But so you know, being arrested for speaking Hawaiian in Hawaii. The United States, 95% of Hawaiians were against the overthrow of our hyper-literate, 98% literate, renewable hydropowered, universal healthcare, having zero homelessness, having country with actual racial equality, and the U.S. invaded, destroyed our system, banned our language and culture, turned us into a slave plantation. Okay, so there's a long list. This is what the Vietnamese fought against, right? This is what the goal of the United States was, to turn all countries into whatever they want and something like this, right? And that was what the U.S. did to Hawaii. And so, let me see if I can get my Mauna Kea. So on Mauna Kea, because somewhere I have a Mauna Kea thread, but I'm not sure if where exactly I put it. Okay, that's not really one. Yeah, this one. Okay, so this is one of the acts of resistance that we went through, right? That was talking about that the Palestinians were in support of us, right? A heavily armed police force arrested 33 Native Hawaiian elders. By the end there was far more than that. They are peacefully protecting our most sacred mountain from desecration. Here, let me play this with audio.
I speak Eva, but I cannot give him. Well, I like you guys man carry me.
Aloha akue, aloha mai, e kuaina, iwi kukuna, ke aloha nani e.
Kumamai, kululu, kalaba! Ikua! Kulanaba! Ikua! Ikua uki, ikua boy, ikua mau, amau kai ulu e uki e kulia! Ikua! Unity, Hawaiians, unity! Rise up, unity! Go! The mountain gonna bring us together! Yo!
Stand for the Mauna now. Don't leave the Mauna.
Anyways, so this is just like part of the mass arrests, but so obviously in Hawaii, while the cameras are on, the United States doesn't want to show Hawaiians on international TV being brutalized to the extent that they can get away with killing Palestinians. You know, so I feel like, you know, so that's why I said, like, in Hawaii, it could be worse. Now, if the cameras are off, the police in Hawaii, they massacre Hawaii, they kill Hawaiians, they will beat up, incarcerate, throw you in the prison cell forever. they the military will do whatever it wants, bomb the mountains, poison the water. But when the cameras are on, they try to make it look peaceful. And so, like in Hawaii, it was a different situation because in Hawaii, the rate at which the people are, how should we say that? The if Hawaiians were to respond militarily, the United States would probably just massacre all the Hawaiians. Probably the U.S. the Pearl Harbor is right there. Most Hawaiians, so many Hawaiians are in the U.S. military, unfortunately, and so there's a lot of deep brainwashing in Hawaii. So it's the geopolitical and geostrategic, and the social and cultural and economic realities in Hawaii are different from Palestine. It's like also it's different in Vietnam, right? In Vietnam, the U.S. military is just actively trying to wipe that entire people out, right? In Palestine, the people are not all being actively. In Palestine, it's not a all-out war, exterminatory war to the extent that Vietnam was. They're just trying to just crush and kill everyone. But it's also more. It's more than Hawaii. It's really like it's really, you see where it's like it's so hard to it's hard to determine what exactly the best means of resistance is. When you tell people like we need to do X and Y and Z, if you want people to take up arms and actually fight an oppressor, number one, you have to convince them that the situation is so bad that, because most people don't want to get themselves killed for no reason. So it's like the situation has to be so bad that like this is a preferable option, and the high probability of you dying, right, is preferable to the level of suffering and oppression and violence and death and murder you will suffer otherwise. And so, like, that's why I say as bad as it is in Hawaii, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as Vietnam, or it's not as bad as Iraq, it's not as bad as those places. And it also matters like what means the oppressor will go to deal with you, right? So like it's similar for native people in Turtle Island, right, or Native Americans. The United States will sick rubber bullets. They'll shoot you with ice hoses. They'll take attack dogs on you. If they can get away with it, they'll just kill Native Americans. The United States police will kill black people. They'll just shoot. But they have to do it in the dark. They won't do it like on camera, right? But whereas in Palestine, in Iraq, in Vietnam, they will just openly massacre as many people as they feel like it that day, right? So it's still, it's a different situation depending on where you are and what the U.S. feels like can get. It's really, sometimes it's just like there's more billionaires and their children live in Hawaii compared to the number of billionaires and their children who live in Gaza. In Gaza, there are no, like in Hawaii, we have billionaires everywhere, right? They live here. We have Pierre Omidyar, we have Oprah Winfrey, right? In Hawaii, we have all these people, right? Not these people. In Hawaii, we have all these people. We have Obama. We have Mark Zuckerberg. We're living in ghettos. We're living in poverty and slums. But the billionaires also live in Hawaii. They have all this pristine real estate. They go to beach. They don't want their beautiful aquamarine ocean and their green, beautiful ranch, Oprah's ranch. They don't want that to be. They don't want the property values to go down, and they don't want their rich billionaire children. They don't want Jack Johnson, right? They don't want all their little rich kids. So many freaking spoiled rich kids, right? They don't want all the spoiled little rich billionaire and millionaire children to be threatened by chaos and violence, right? In Gaza, it's also a beach, right? It's a tropical region, very nice beach actually, until it was filled with feces because the U.S. and Israel blew up all the sanitary facilities, and now they have no ability. They have all this untreated waste, right? So the billionaires of the world and who run the colonial capitalist system, they don't care about Gaza beach because they don't live there. They don't give a crap. They don't care. They don't care if there's missiles flying there. The U.S. billionaires, they don't want, they don't care about missiles and flying over Vietnam, because they don't live in Vietnam, right? But In Hawaii, they live in Hawaii. So that's one of the major differences. So in some senses, that's a good. In some, obviously, that's makes it the level of murder and just absolute brutality that the colonizer can get away with in Hawaii is lower, because they don't want it to turn into a full war zone. Not because they care about Hawaiians, but because of NIMBY, not in my backyard. But if you're 6,000, 10,000 miles away from the United States and the billionaire class and the millionaire class, the U.S. don't care about average Americans. But Hawaii doesn't have average Americans a lot of the time. It's mostly the richest of the world and Americans. So those people, they don't want their area to be too wrecked. Now they do want the oppressed people to keep being good slaves in Larry Ellison's resort, right? They want good colonial resort towns, right? It's like Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong, the British don't want Hong Kong to be a war zone, right? Because the British are too busy, right? Trying to have they were, when it was a colony, they're too busy trying to keep Hong Kong as a resort town, right? Trying to find, let me see if I can find my Hong Kong. Right? So like Hong Kong is a Riviera of the Orient. They don't want war there, right? They have warships there, but they don't want war in where they're staying, because that would be really, it would disrupt their pina coladas and their being carried by Chinese slaves. In the same reason that Dole didn't want a war where he has his pineapple factory right now, right? You don't want a war there. But in places, right? And so this is the kind of thing that, that's what alters the decisions that oppressed peoples have to make about how to resist the colonizer. The people on the Native Hawaiians, while we were on Mauna Kea, many of them were ex-military, right? Like, for example, Aina Momona is started by Walter Riddy, right? One of the founding members was Uncle Walter. And, Uncle Walter was in Vietnam. Uncle Walter flew planes, or was part of the force that flew planes, dropped bombs on the Vietnamese people, killed innocent Vietnamese people. And so Uncle Walter, as a Native Hawaiian, he came back, and that's part of what radicalized him, and he became an anti-U.S., anti-colonial, anti-imperial resistor, is because he realized what he did in Vietnam, right, was horrible and on the wrong side of history. And so Aina Momona is which was started by him. It's not like he was incapable of violence. He was trained to do violence, right? Many of the people on Mauna Kea, which the entire thing was in that time, we Native Hawaiians chose, right, in that struggle, right? Sorry, I'm running out of spoons to keep on choosing the right pictures at this point, but let me see if I can get the Mauna Kea picture. I got. I don't have all my threads, but anyways, on let's see, Silver Spook guy, Mauna Kea. Here's one. So on Mauna Kea, the U.S. was bombing while we were protesting. All the protests were peaceful, because that was the way that we elected to resist, and because we felt that if it went otherwise, then the probability that, because the point of the project was to stop the building of the 30-meter telescope. If it went another way, we didn't have the capability to, well, let's just put it this way. There's a very good chance that we wouldn't be talking right now, let's just say. And the Hawaiians, we didn't have the capability, organization, and the Indo-Pacific Command is, let's just say 50 miles away. There's many considerations to take in, right? But that was the way that we elected to do things in this time, in this place. In the same way that the native water protectors in Wet'suwet'en in so-called Canada, the Dakota Access Pipeline protectors, right? The DAPL water protectors, who are indigenous peoples, right? They chose their action in the way that they chose their resistance in that time, in that place, in that way, because of their own knowledge of their own situation. And it's, this like the choice to resist is not an easy one. If you don't resist, maybe you'll survive another day. If you resist, maybe the colonizer will just kill you all. You know? I mean, you might not even, or maybe they'll do, maybe the colonizer will respond and making your life worse than it already is, right? This has happened before. The United States has wiped people off of the face of the earth for this. In Taiwan, indigenous peoples there they don't exist anymore just because they resisted, right? So the choice by the oppressed to resist their colonization is never an easy one. So it's, you know, in some cases it's easier to just accept what's happening, keep your head down and try to survive, go on the Trail of Tears, or just, you know, keep your head down and, you know, just try to not die in U.S. occupied Iraq, you know, Israel occupied Palestine. The choice to resist itself, it takes a tremendous amount of courage. No matter, even if you're just peaceful resisting, you become a target, right? There's so many. I mean, Big Teal, I know, has a long list of the black activists that are just in prison. They didn't go out shooting at the United States. They would be dead, right? But just for peaceful resisting, they're in prison for the rest of their life, right? These are civil rights activists. These are black activists, environmental activists, indigenous activists, right? So the choice to resist in any way as an oppressed person takes a lot, right? And then the choice, if you're going to do that violently, you better know exactly what you're doing, and you better have really thought through and calculated everything you're doing. And actual oppressed people, not average white person, you know, basically no white people are in such situations where they have to do such drastic measures. And many are people that are certainly the privileged people of the Western world. They will never have to deal with that question, you know. They will never have to deal with that question, or maybe not. They haven't had to. Maybe they will in the future, but they haven't yet, right? They don't have to ask that. They don't have to ask that question, right? They have the privilege, like I said, they have the privilege of being able to look from their air-conditioned, you know, nice first world position, look down and say, this is what you should do. If I was in your position, Palestinian, I would do X. If I was in your position, Native American, I would do X. If I was in your position, African person, I would do X, right? But you don't know anything. You don't know anything. And the fact that you are in that position, not with that person, means you don't have the courage. If you were in that position, you wouldn't have the courage to do shit. Because if you had any sense or courage, you would be down. You would be one of the allies and accomplices that are actually on the front line, getting brutalized by the police, getting beaten up, getting the U.S. police attack dogs biting your arm off, getting fire hosed in negative 33 degrees Celsius, right? Like the DAPL. If you were courageous, actually educated and courageous person, you would be shutting your white mouth, and you will be down there on the front lines, or you would just be shutting your face, and you would be listening to them, or you'd be on the front line, and you'd be doing something else, but you would not be telling these people what to do. It's only your ignorance, racism, and colonial and Western exceptionalism installed by the diseducation system of your US, your Canada, or your Europe, wherever the fuck you came from, that you think that is an appropriate thing to do. And so, anyway, so I should wrap this up because it's almost 1. So long story short, I know I kind of like went off in a lot of directions simultaneously, but finally, you know, in Hawaii, we are still under U.S. occupation, as Gaza is under U.S.-backed Israeli settler colonial occupation, and we Native Hawaiians support all peoples of the world, all colonized peoples of the world in their liberation. The people of Niger, like we said, all of Mali, Burkina Faso, and that are coming out from under this. All the peoples of Asia that are continue to be threatened by U.S. imperialism and a would-be proxy war to try to stomp and resubjugate China, which the Chinese people don't deserve to be under anyone's foot, right? And have their own path to liberation that they are taking. To the Bolivian people, who they're taking their own path, and they have the right and the imperative and the prerogative to choose their own paths. And similarly, the people of Gaza have their own prerogative and their own right and their own need to choose how, when, where decolonization happens, including up to and including military resistance against a massively more empowered military terroristic. Israel is terrorist. People are saying this is a terrorist attack. Israel's existence is terrorism. Its entire, it's every occupier that's in that region is there choosing to take someone else's native home and benefit from colonial genocide. Your existence as a settler in Palestine is terrorism, on top of your missile strikes or terroristic activity, your bombing of the water facilities, your bombing of the sewage treatment facilities, your Israeli snipers shooting people's ankles off and killing journalists in the Gaza Strip. That's all terrorism, right? So this idea that this is the Hamas terrorist, this is the Palestinian terrorist attack. Israel is already doing the terrorism. They are the terrorism. They are the violence. They are the military, vastly in proportion by their sheer existence, right? This is like saying that the Vietnamese fighters fighting to liberate their own country were terrorists against the U.S., right? This is like saying that the Iraqis are an Iraqi 16-year-old who has to, or 22-year-old who has to pick up a gun with no resources to try to fight against an illegitimate genocidal million Iraqi killing invader, right? This is like saying that Iraqis are all terrorists if they pick up a gun and try to resist the mega aggression and mega murder Iraq that's this again, that's what we're talking about. This calls for Iraq fighter I'm trying to find some images. The people who are resisting the genocide and the shooting of nurses and doctors and children in hospitals, right? Those are not terrorists. Those are liberating. Those are anti-colonial liberator fighters. And they chose that means of shooting back at your illegitimate, genocidal, war crime committing American soldiers. And that is justified because of what you've already done as an American soldier, as the United States as a country, as the United States as an empire. And to call that Iraqi a terrorist, if you are calling the Palestinians or the Iraqis or the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War terrorists, you are siding with the empire. You are doing the both-sidesism. You are doing the not even neutrality leaning towards the oppressor. This is the de facto weapon, especially for the liberal. The conservative just says good for those Palestinians. They don't deserve to live. But the liberal, which is the majority of the West, the majority of the oppressor class, which is to say that, well, both sides are doing bad things. And so let's just all stop while you make money from the non-stopping that will continue to happen. Right? So, anyone calling the Palestinians terrorists who have to stop, those people should be called out for who they are. You look at who's doing it. It's all the liberal, it's all the Justin Trudeaus and the Bidens, it's the AOCs, Ilhan Omar's, random white German with a racist Lovecraft handle, adding me on Mastodon, which is full of white racists. People say leave Twitter because Mastodon, people are saying like you should leave Twitter and go to Mastodon because Mastodon has Twitter has Nazi collaborators and there's lots of Nazis, so you should go to Mastodon. Mastodon is full of liberal Nazi apologists like Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau, and so Mastodon is full of Nazi collaborators and which is the same thing as Nazis. So if you are a collaborator with the United States, a collaborator with this genocidal fascist Israeli government, you are also a fascist, but with better makeup on. So yeah. Anyway, so I hope that clarifies that. If you appreciate the education that we give, I know this is not maybe what many of the white audiences want to hear, but my point is to educate you, not to ameliorate infantile notions in your head installed by the non-education system, right? My job is to teach you the truth from an indigenous, actually colonized person's perspective, as best as I understand it. And so, but if you do appreciate that, consider supporting us through direct buying us a coffee or whatever they call that thing. It really does help a lot, because we, as the oppressed peoples of the U.S. genocidal occupation in Hawaii, we don't have a lot of resources here, and we don't get paid a lot by the United States government. No university or school will pay me to do this education. So we have to ask for donations from all of our listeners and viewers. So thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe to if you have not. If you would like to continue to get more of this content. Also, don't forget you can become a Patreon member, and that really does help as well, because without the Patreon support, it's actually a large chunk of our support now. We're not, financially, we're not doing super awesome. We've never been really above the poverty line, I don't think, at the Silver Spoon Cooperative, but we also at least have lights and electricity on, so that's good. If you would like to support us Native Hawaiians continuing to do this anti-colonial education, give us support. Also, you can get access to the Silver Spoon Discord, behind the scenes of what we're working on, like Neofeud 2. I also make cyberpunk and science fiction adventure games, but grounded in reality from an indigenous, anti-colonial, anti-capitalist perspective, as opposed to from a white science fictional perspective. And you can also get access to the Silver Spook behind the scenes of what we're working on, including the Silver Spook decolonization of the lawn, and the Silver Spook Cooperative, the Silver Spook Housing Cooperative, which has no landlords at it, and the Silver Spook University, that's over 1,000 hours of everything I've ever produced, categorized according to topic. Also, don't forget you can check out, I've already shouted out the itch, so you can also find our games such as Neofeud on itch.io. I worked on this game for 2.5 years. I did the music, the art, the writing, and the programming for this game, and basically everything except about half the voice acting. And it is a game that's on Steam, and it does benefit us if you pick it up and leave even a very short review, because it helps us get discovered in the algorithm. And all the revenue goes straight back to us, and it doesn't go out to any third parties. You can also get Decolonators, among other games, on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and for Linux. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io, and it gives the maximum revenue to us when you pick it up there. And you can get Indigistar, which is about also another science fiction game about resisting imperial occupation, healing the land and the people, preventing erasure of your native language and culture, and confronting the invaders before it is too late. So this is communist, indigenous, sci-fi resistance. That's what it is. Pigeon with Gun is a game where you play a pigeon with a gun fighting billionaires, giant robot housed billionaires and liberal politicians and tons of cops. And Women is a book by Holly that is raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity, and it is a book that is Mary's perspective from the Bible, and is about critiquing that evangelical Protestant Christian world. And you can get that for free or throw some money our way when you pick that up. And don't forget, you can follow us on the Nazi field, that's also known as the liberal Nazi apologist site called Mastodon. At Silver Spoon Games at octodon.social, and at Silver Spoon Games at mastodon.social. And you can also follow at Silver Spoon Guy on Twitter, and at Silver Spoon Games minus the RE and silver for the game stuff. We also have Instagram, and we have Facebook. And of course, also you can follow Terminus C, which is a Terminus Cyberstar, which is a cyberpunk RPG that I'm the content director and lead writer of. So this game is another one. I work on, most of my day I work on games. I'm not talking about these topics, but today I was like, it's a good day to just comment on what's happening right now, because I think it's an important thing to, give my discussion on. And you can also follow Terminus C, and you can also follow Holly. Wait, I spelled that wrong. There. You can also follow Holly at the Tech Fairy. Holly is a partner here at the Silver Spook Cooperative, wife and partner, producer and manager with Kate Nick's show. That is a Twitch stream, music, and variety show. parent, caregiver for children here, educator, writer, and also educator, and also sharing important informations all the time. So don't forget, follow Holly. Also, thank you to all the people on the list of our supporters over there. Thanks very much. Without your support, we're not able to continue to do this work. So thank you so much to everybody keeps on backing us in this ongoing struggle. And also struggle to finish Neofeud too. Struggle against colonialism and capitalism. Struggle to maintain our Hawaiian language, and also supporting the struggles of our relatives over there in Palestine. And we'll be back later on the Twitch stream around between 5 and 6 Pacific time. Solidarity from Hawaii.